Hello. Let's say you have an itch for playing some Nintendo 64, but in an arcade. Here's a Nintendo-themed arcade. I've covered construction in another video. So instead, I want to focus on two special features here. I picked the Super Nintendo theme because there's more visual clarity in its design elements. What I'm trying to say is this logo does not translate well into this type of LED backlit stained glass flavored marquee. I'm also not sure how to interpret the Nintendo 64 as a theme because the N64 kiosk is hard to describe what it's going for. The next challenge is how to do an analog stick in an arcade cabinet. We're working with original hardware, so that presents some challenge. The N64's whole reputation was the analog stick, but my first analog control panel implementation lacks grace. However, the real issue is the N64's forced use of its analog stick in almost every game. So I have an equally solution. This PCB converts digital to analog control using 4 voltage divider circuits for the X and Y axes. So it's like this. A universal board like this can be tricky because many consoles don't adopt a standard for the polarity of the X or Y axes. I want this board for any situation like this, so this PCB lets you pick the ground to VCC polarity for either axis. This PCB gets wired into a pad hack of a third-party N64 controller. I did mount the Nintendo 64 PCB upside down, so the controller pack is still accessible when the need arises. Another side effect of forcing analog with digital buttons is we've unintentionally enabled the up and down or left and right simultaneous inputs, which not every game knows what to do with, so that's fun. Mario Kart is a bit touchy because of this, and I'll show you in a bit. So what does the analog to digital PCB thingy mean? You basically use a D-pad like input for the entire N64 library, but each key press outputs the full analog range. So we've got a 2 to the first analog resolution here. Mario Kart 64 is a bit unwieldy at first until this new control input settles with your muscle memory. Super Mario 64 is not near as bad as you would expect. It takes some getting used to, but the precision is still there, just with faster presses of the keys to get that precision. This upper arrow key layout are the C buttons, so camera controls are still mapped as well. These are also custom PCBs I made for control panel implementations just like this. So let's talk about that handling. Some better than others, like Diddy Kong Racing, which does not have that sloppy handling consequence of rocking the extremes of the analog stick, which is easy to do here with this D-pad conversion. You sometimes have to do this to level out tricky corners in Mario Kart, hence this sound cue when your traction is about to slip. It just takes a bit of practice to avoid this touchy handling. But I did pull a fast one on you and you didn't even notice. This is actually a Neo Geo themed arcade with the appropriate colors that would match Nintendo, and it's got a tube TV and an N64 in the bottom. So what about that Super Nintendo theme I just showed you earlier? Where are the SNES games? So this arcade actually houses a 5:4 ratio LCD monitor, so I'm leveraging that digital display with a Raspberry Pi. It's perfect for Super Nintendo emulation. This control panel is a standard HID USB compatible input device, and running the Super Nintendo experience is a mini NES case with a Raspberry Pi 3B Plus inside running RetroPie. It does the job quite nicely. So there's not much to talk about with the Raspberry Pi Super Nintendo emulator, but I did add one extra piece of hardware, and that's this hardware level controlled automatic attract mode. This little assembly is a macro keyboard with a OLED LCD and some extra breakout cherry key buttons, which is actually a derivative version of this one, but it functions the same. On the arcade, it's a bit hard to see this macro keyboard trigger with the display as they're a few feet apart, so I'm going to switch to this portable screen and keyboard all on a desktop so you can see both functioning. So in this emulator setup, to quit a game, you press escape. Selecting a new game is done with the arrow keys and then pressing A on the keyboard to launch the game. This macro keyboard performs that same 3-key macro sequence with some delays for the GUI to catch up. This 3-key sequence happens on a timer loop indefinitely whenever the macro keyboard is toggled into this mode. I can adjust the demo time with this potentiometer. This determines how long the game will play or just demo. So what's special about this Super Nintendo arcade is it can run in a track mode with all the games within the emulator's library. It makes for a nice dynamic attract mode when the arcade's running. Here's some time-lapse footage of that. Note, both of these two arcades centered in frame are RetroPie emulators. The SNES arcade on the left is running the macro attract mode hardware. When the macro keyboard is not in demo mode, it serves as a dedicated hotkey keyboard for the emulator. Handy if you're a streamer or maybe running a Tetris tournament and need to recall a save state for everyone doing standardized play. This hardware demo mode keyboard is really a non-essential gimmick to the arcade, but I like the idea of having an infinite attract mode to cycle through the game library. And because it's all hardware based, it's plug and play and can be customized to whatever system. And that's my Super Nintendo arcade. In full honesty, this was going to be a GameCube arcade since I did the GC loader mod for this GameCube and cut the marquee, but that's probably for another time. Thanks for watching. I'll leave you with the soothing sounds of some hardware attract mode.